Mech Arena is a mech shooter on Android, iOS, and PC, where you can progress through the game to unlock, buy, and upgrade all kinds of varying mechs and weapons of varying performances. The center point of this progression is called the Gear Hub, which is in the bottom left of your hangar view. This can be a bit confusing. Long story short, you unlock new items in each tier, which can then be purchased with currencies. Every time you buy an item, you get progression points called tier stars toward the next tier. However, once you unlock that tier, those tier stars won't help anymore. As an example, this is my free-to-play account. If I were to buy, say, Brick House, then I would get tier stars toward tier 8, which is the next one that I'm working on unlocking. However, if I were to go back and buy, say, Killshot, which I would never do, by the way, it would not help me progress at all because I have already unlocked tier 7. Because all it's doing is counting the number of rank stars, essentially, of the things that I own in this tier, counting from mechs and weapons. Now, like I said earlier, Mech Arena can be downloaded on PC via the Plarium Play game launcher. This is important because there are special download links specifically for PC, which will give you free items plus in-game currencies after completing the tutorial. You can find these in the top link in the description. It does claim to work on mobile as well, but as far as I know, these do not work on mobile. If you're playing on mobile though, there's free stuff for you too. After your first login, you have 3 days to claim one promo code exclusive to new players. Promo codes can be found in this mail section of the hangar right here on the bottom. There are codes that appear that are for everyone, but the codes that are exclusive to new players are honestly the best ones, so if you've been playing for less than 3 days, I highly recommend you use one of them. These can also be found in the top link in the description. It'll give you a very good head start into the actual progression of the game, being the Gear Hub. Now, tiers 1 and 2, they are simple. You can do pretty much whatever you want, and you will not face any long-term consequences. However, I would avoid spending A coins, which are the purple currency here. These are the premium currency. They are very hard to come by, and things that cost A coins are considered to be far more expensive than those that cost credits. So your goal for a lot of this progression, including up to tiers 5 and 6, are going to be to spend as few A coins as possible while still getting as many of the good things that you can. As mentioned, A coins are the premium currency, and certain items cost a lot of them. So you will have a lot of A coins stockpiled at certain points while following this guide, but that is on purpose, that is by design. Do not spend them. Another quick note, if you are a new player, you will get 2 derby events back to back in this events section. You should try to finish both of them. One should be a free rank 4 epic mech, being Killshot, and the following one should be a free legendary weapon, rank 4 disc launcher. Both of them are worth going for. Now, for the sake of this video, I am going to be assuming that you didn't get either of those items, and I will be suggesting hangars and purchases based purely on each tier that we're talking about. Moving on from tier 1 and 2, your goal in tier 3 is to collect a few decent mechs while spending relatively few A coins. If you are a free-to-play player, a good rule of thumb is to never spend A coins to buy weapons, period. You should save them exclusively for mechs, pilots, and rank upgrades. Speaking of pilots, we have not talked about that yet. So the pilot market, right next to the gear market here, includes all of the different pilots that you could get, some of them being very cheap and others being very expensive. Pilots simply boost the damage of individual weapon types, and they will become a rather major long-term expense, so try to prioritize buying pilots for weapon classes that stay relevant, being primarily assault, missile, guided, and close quarters. Most of the others can be good. The only one I would explicitly stay away from is artillery. Going back to the gear market, here are all of the things that you're going to want from tier 3, both the mechs and the weapons. And just note that these listed here are simply for progression. If you don't need those tier stars, then do not buy them. They are not good items, but they are a cheap way to progress. A lot of players will rank up Guardian or Ares. I would recommend you don't do that. Ares is overshadowed by Aegis in tier 5, and you likely won't use Guardian long term either, so investing in them is not very cost effective. If you do want to rank up a tier 3 mech, Shadow is the best one. Tier 4 is where things start to get a little more interesting, because now you have access to legendary weapons. These weapons are very strong, but also very expensive. Some are worth the cost, others aren't, but these are my recommendations. Now, you'll only need 1 or 2 in order to actually progress through the tiers, but you may end up getting more later down the road. For the sake of argument, I'm also going to list here the ones that I think are explicitly not worth getting under any circumstances because I believe the weapon itself is just extraordinarily bad. Now, those legendary weapons will not get you to tier 5 by themselves. You will also want to buy these other weapons as well to push you past that 24 tier star goal as cheaply as possible. If you decide you want to invest heavily into a low tier mech, Lancer, Shadow, and Tengu are the best ones. The rest of this guide will assume that you will not invest in any of them, but all of them can be effective, most notably Tengu, if you decide to do that. So just keep that in the back of your mind when it comes to purchasing other mechs to build your hangar. Some tier 4 weapons to keep an eye out for that are not available yet would be Hornet 6, Burrow Beam 6, and Charge Rocket 6. So now on to tier 5. You have a lot more options in terms of weapons, as well as having access to epic mechs. This is where you're going to want to collect some premium weapons, as well as a couple mechs that'll last you quite a while. So get ready to spend a long time in this tier, and do not cheap out on it. First and foremost, you will want this mech, Aegis. This is a lot more expensive than you're used to, but this mech will single-handedly carry you through 90% of your battles up to tier 6. I'm currently in tier 7 on my free-to-play account. I have 5 legendary mechs, but my Aegis is still better than most of them, and I continue to use it in my main hangar. So, update on the Aegis usage. I am now in tier 8 and own 8 legendary mechs, and I still use my Aegis on a regular basis. Along with Aegis, you will also want Pod Gun 8. Again, expensive, but this is one of the nastiest combos to get at this stage of the game, and I promise you will thank me once you have it. Now here is where I will warn you against upgrades. As you can already tell, things are getting progressively more expensive, so every decision needs to be more careful and more calculated. Upgrades seem cheap on their own, but they quickly add up, and you'll find that a few extra % on your stats isn't nearly as valuable as a completely new mech or weapon. With that said, let's continue. Besides Aegis, you will also want Zephyr. You'll be able to afford Zephyr before you can buy Pod Gun 8, but I personally believe that saving to get Pod 8 first is the better way of doing it. Especially since with everything I'll be having you get in tier 5, you'll actually end up buying one more item than you actually need. So if possible, you'll want to skip Zephyr entirely, as it is the weakest of the lot. Redeemer is a bit more expensive, but it is significantly more valuable, especially given its recent buff. So if by this point you already have Killshot from the Derby event or Cheetah from the daily login, then you can go ahead and skip on Zephyr to save you some resources. In terms of weapons, you will want these listed here. These are very effective. Tetra Rifle is a key item for next tier specifically, but if you have trouble aiming very well, then you may want to go with Dreadshot or Blast RPG instead. These weapons are not entirely great on their own, but they will be used on Orion, which is a long-range mech that has an ability that will more than double your damage output, so the relatively low damage of Dreadshot and Blast RPG will not be an issue. Again, it's more recommended that you get Tetra Rifle as the better weapon overall, but it is a sniper and requires some good aiming, so if you can't really manage that, then it's probably a good idea to go with one of the others. Before we continue, I feel the need to expand on this choice a bit, especially if you've seen the many videos where I've mentioned Railgun 8 being the best choice for Orion. Now, this is true, Railgun is generally better, but it suffers a lot from a long reload, as well as the fact that Tetra Rifle is simply the safer choice. Tetra works well on many mechs, whereas Railgun is exclusively only effective on Orion. Plus, if you enjoy the playstyle of Tetra Rifle, you can also buy Tetra Rifle 10 in Tier 6 so that you can continue using it for longer term. I would highly recommend you do not go exclusively for cheap progress. I've seen many players make that mistake, and my hanger always beats them. The truth of the matter is that in order to make, let's say, an epic weapon perform on par with a legendary, you need to not only buy it, but also rank it up several times, which costs you a lot of credits, but you also end up spending quite a bit of A coins being the premium currency, and you really don't want to be spending those. And all of that for, at the end of the day, a rather inferior weapon anyway. Now, before we go to Tier 6, I do want to quickly point out Strike Rocket 8 by name. This weapon will probably be tempting. It is super strong and you probably will be harassed by people who have these, but the long-term plan here is to get the stronger ones that are in Tier 6, which would then make these redundant and honestly wasteful. But also keep an eye out for Hornet 8, Suppressor 8, Burrow Beam 8, Charge Rocket 8, and Compound Beam 8. These weapons are not available yet, but they are very strong, so that's just something to keep in mind. On to Tier 6. Your goal here, as it's always been, is to minimize A-coin cost while still getting everything that you need. So what do you need? Firstly, Orion. It might not look like it, but this is the highest damage dealer in the entire game. Provided you can hit an enemy with your homing ability, you and all of your team will deal 2.5 times damage to that target. This ability will instantly turn almost any fight in your favor, regardless of how unfair it is. And this is why Orion should be your first priority. This is also why I had you get Tetra Rifle 8s in the previous tier. High burst damage weapons on Orion are brutal, and there are few other Orion builds that are quite as deadly as that. Though if you can't aim snipers, then you'll have some trouble and may prefer pod gun, tread shot, or blast RPG instead. Now besides Orion, you will also want to get Panther. Fragile mech on paper, but the ability shield is completely indestructible. This basically makes it a temporary tank, but best used at longer ranges so that it's harder for enemies to get past that shield. In terms of weapons, I recommend these. Strike Rocket 10, as I mentioned before, is very strong. You might notice, though, that it only has a single weapon instead of two, and this is due to its rank. Weapons above 8 energy will allow you to only use one until it's upgraded to rank 6, in which case you duplicate the weapon to be able to use 2. This is additionally expensive and costs some A-coins as well for the rank up, but when it's all said and done, your rank 6 Strike Rocket 10s will be about 70% stronger than your rank 5 Strike Rocket 8s would have been, which is just enough damage to guarantee almost any kill with a single magazine. Besides Panther, though, you will not have a lot of mechs capable of carrying 2 10 energy weapons, and as such, it's a good idea to get Panther first and then buy and rank up the weapon later. We have yet another round of these rank up shenanigans in the works for Overdriver 10, where you buy and duplicate it to use 2 of them. This can be saved till the very end of this tier. Now, those 2 weapons will not get you to Tier 7 by themselves, and while they are rather pricey, those are the first of your truly long-term weapons, which you'll continue to use for probably years. To push you into Tier 7, you will also need Storm Rank 10, which you can pair with the 6 that you bought in Tier 4, and either Revoker 10 or Hellfire 10 to pair with whichever other one that you also got in Tier 4. If you're saving A-coins and you find yourself with excess credits, do not spend them on pointless upgrades. There are occasional crate rush events for random weapons that you can spend those credits on, and you can get those items for cheaper than you otherwise would have. It is also worth noting that there are also pilot crate rush events that cost about 4,000 A-coins total, which operate the exact same way as these do, with 20 spins total, except it is 200 A-coins per spin, which is only slightly more expensive than if you were to buy it from the Gear Hub. Even if it takes you 19 spins, 19 out of the 20 in order to get extraordinarily unlucky, but even if it takes you 19 out of the 20, you still save 40 A-coins, plus you get all of the other random crap that's actually in the Crate Rush. Pretty much everything that costs A-coins, it's better to get it from a Crate Rush if possible. Additional Tier 6 weapons to keep an eye out for would of course be Hornet 10, Suppressor 10, Burrow Beam 10, Charge Rocket 10, and Compound Beam 10. All of these weapons are very good. However, you're not going to find 10 energy weapons in Crate Rush events for credits, so it's kind of just luck of the draw as to whether or not these will be available for credits. Don't spend A-coins on them, it's not going to be worth it. And now, finally, you are in Tier 7. You have finally unlocked the legendary mechs, and you will notice that they cost almost 10,000 A-coins each, which is obnoxious. Even still, there are 2 mechs that are worth buying at this price, because these are mechs that you will continue to use pretty much for forever, being Surge and Eclipse, primarily Surge. The other 3 mechs in this tier are very bad, and even though Brickhouse is a lot cheaper comparatively, it's really not worth that price point. You may as well spend those credits on a weapon or possibly even upgrades. Now, it's worth pointing out at this point that recent Crate Rush events here suggest that it's more cost-effective to save your A-coins and buy items through here rather than to buy them straight up from the Gear Hub. As a simple example, Disruptor 10, which happens to be here, is 350 A-coins per spin on this 20-spin event. Now that adds up to 7,000 A-coins total, whereas if you were to buy it from the Gear Hub, you'll notice that it costs 7,125. So not only are you guaranteed to save at least 125 A-coins, you also have the added benefit of, well, occasionally there's free tokens, which is how I got these 2 things. I'm not spending A-coins on this. But not only did I get 2 free tokens for this event, there is also an even drop rate across the board for this event, meaning that most likely it's going to take significantly less than 20 spins in order for me to get this, so I'll get it at a massive discount. I don't even need to have it unlocked in order to get it from this event either. I will almost always cover new Crate Rush events in community posts, so you can watch for those, but sometimes the items are just bad and it's not worth waiting for a good one to actually cycle through, in which case you can just buy it normally. In those cases, I would prioritize credit-based weapons that are 10 energy or higher, because those will appear for A-coins in Crate Rush events. And then in terms of weapons that are 6 or 8 energy, those will always appear in Crate Rush events for credits, which is very, very cheap. 600,000 credits at most, and those are usually ones that I will go for as well. But essentially, what I talked about with the weapons is also true with the mechs. You can very often get them at a significant discount. A lot of times they are only rank 4 though, so that's something to keep in mind. But even still, you can almost guarantee to get them cheaper from a Crate Rush than you could if you were to buy them from the Gear Hub. However, that does not mean that every mech Crate Rush event is worth going for, because, for example, if you were to get Scorpius from a Crate Rush event, which is exactly what happened for me, I got it with the 1 free token that I had, which is cool and I'm not complaining, but this is a mech that you should not bother with at all. So unless you're like me and you got it for free, you should spend 0 A-coins trying to get this mech because it's just actively a garbage mech. And in terms of weapons, I would go for these, with of course all of the epic ones being low priority, ones that you only buy for the cheap progression points. At this point, you should also just be on the lookout for the legendary reload implant for Stormrack. If you happen to find it, make sure you have the A-coins necessary to buy it. It is very effective and frankly the only implant that's worth spending that many A-coins for. Now, you will stay in this tier for a very long time. feel free to rank up whatever you want at this point. You can use these rank ups to save from having to get one of the epic weapons, like Stasis Beam, to progress to Tier 8. The epic stuff is much cheaper to buy and upgrade than the legendary stuff, so you're going to probably invest at least a little bit into one of the mechs. One of Panther, Aegis, or Orion will be used long-term until you get Lacewing or Nomad in Tier 8. Assuming you don't get any other legendary mechs from Crate Rush events, you should determine which one you're going to go for beforehand and refrain from upgrading the others. Tier 7, you will also be looking for Hornet 12, Burrow Beam 12, and Charge Rocket 12. And these will be ones that are worth spending A coins for. Now for Tier 8, there are actually 2 legendary mechs that cost credits and are both incredibly effective, so you should definitely go for both of those, Hemlock and Solus. However, besides those, you will also want to get Nomad and Lacewing, which both cost A coins, but are both incredibly meta. Apart from those, the other mechs in this tier also are available for A coins, but none of them are actually worth the purchase. So we move on to weapons. And this is where the weapon section of the Gear Hub just stops, because as you may have noticed, it essentially works off of energy and grade at the same time. You have 6 energy legendaries in Tier 4, and then 8s, and then 10s, and then 12s, and then 16s, and there's nothing higher than 16, so it just stops for these next 2 tiers. These are the weapons you're going to want to get, but honestly, you can get like pretty much whatever you want at this point. There's a lot of weapons that are only available for direct purchase and not available for in-game currency. This is due to the game's extraordinarily, honestly, hilariously long release cycle in terms of free-to-play, and this comes into play in Tier 9 in the Gear Hub. There's literally only one mech in Tier 9 that's available for in-game currency, and that is Seeker, in which case there's no rush to get to Tier 9 whatsoever. And also, like I said, at the end of the day, it's cheaper to get it from a Crate Rush event anyway. You'll also want to look for Hornet 16, Suppressor 16, and Burrow Beam 16 when they are available. Some mechs in Tier 9 to look out for that are not free to play yet are Deathwalker, Outlaw, Parasite, Blizzfrost, and Citadel. This final hanger is very close to the top meta, the only differences being Outlaw replaces Hemlock or Solus, whichever one that you like less. Nomad is replaced with either Blizzfrost or Citadel. Deathwalker replaces the other of the 2 supports, or Lacewing if it's a bad map for it. And the Revokers are replaced with Burrow Beams. And of course, the pod guns could be replaced with either Strike Rocket or Hornet. There are a lot of different ways that you could make valid hangers, and that is why this time around I'm not going to show what the ideal hanger looks like for each tier, because it really depends on how you like to play and what things you decide to heavily invest in. But I am showing this final hanger because the endgame meta is fairly clearly defined. And that is the entire Gear Hub. I know it is a lot to take in, but I don't think it's super complicated, and you'll catch on pretty fast. I will have my notes for this video in text form for easy reference at any time. It will be posted in the info and notes section on my Discord, and you can reference that whenever you want. Otherwise, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like. I would very much appreciate that. Otherwise, that will be it from me. Appreciate y'all. Take care.